Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to another installment with myself, Janet. I'm working through the King James's Bible. Today I'm in the Book of Kings, working through chapters 19 and 20 today. So let's get started. So in chapter 19 we start with King Ahab telling his wife Jezebel how the prophet Elijah had just destroyed all of their gods, their false gods of Baal and the wooden tree goddess. So Jezebel, being from Syria, and this is her main god, Baal, she is furious and she sets out to get rid of Elijah. So Elijah knows about this, he flees to Beersheba. Beersheba is under the reign of the Judah tribe, so he doesn't really feel that safe there either, and he ends up going out towards the wilderness. And a day into his journey into the wilderness, he sits under a tree and he becomes quite down and low and speaks to God. And he asks God if he could just let him die. He thinks he's done enough now. It's like, my work is done. I don't feel worthy. He's kind of like saying that I haven't done as good as my previous fathers. So he sees himself as a sinner and he's just in this really solemn state of mind. So then he goes to sleep under the tree. And as he's sleeping, an angel comes and touches him to wake him up. And the angel asks him to eat and to drink. And there on the coals was some bread and some water. So he ate and he drank and he rested. And then the angel comes a second time, touches him, has him eat and drink this bread and water that the angel has brought. He eats and drinks it, and then he is able to move on from that place for 40 days and 40 nights. And he goes to Mount Horeb, or Mount Sinai, the famous place where Moses was when he got God's commandments. He goes there, known as the Mountain of God. And he goes into a cave. And God asks him, "What are you doing here?" And he tells him that he's been trying to get rid of all of these false prophets. He feels like he's the only one that is a true believer in the God of Israel, and it's like all of the people who are like him have been killed. He's the only one left, and he's fleeing now for his own life. It's like he's failed, and he's just like, this is why I'm here. Then God tells Elijah to go out and stand on the mountain. Now it says a strong wind passes, but that's not God. An earthquake happens. That's not God. A fire is present. That's not God. Then a tiny, still voice, like a whisper. And Elijah hears this and immediately knows it's God, because he feels the presence in this tiny voice. Now, just to explain this, going over these things, everybody thinks that God is going to come in this grand, huge awakening. It's not always the case. It's showing here that he wasn't in this huge windstorm. He wasn't in this earthquake, and he wasn't in the fire. He was in the stillness, in the silence, in the whisper of a voice. So when Elijah hears this voice, he humbles himself and he puts his mantle over his face. And he hears again in the words, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he tells him the same story. I'm here. I feel like I'm the only believer left of God. They've killed all the other prophets. I've been trying to get rid of all their false gods, and I'm fleeing for my life. Then God gives him some clear instructions. He wants him to go out to the wilderness, to the area of Damascus, and to anoint King Hazael as the king over Syria. Then he wants him to anoint Jehu, and he's the prophet. He wants him to be king over Israel. And he tells him that Elisha is to be the prophet that will replace him, so will succeed him. Then he says, anyone not killed by Hazael will be killed by Jehu. Whoever escapes the killing of Jehu will be killed by Elisha. So it's like 3 strikes and you're out. And he's going to make sure that all of the people who have basically gone against him will no longer be. And he says that the 7,000 Israels will be saved from death. And those are the ones who did not worship Baal. So this showed Elijah that he's not on his own, that he has other people around him. So this must have given him a real new set of motivation and confidence to go out there and carry on the work that he's been doing. And so he does. He leaves and he finds Elisha first. He doesn't go with what God said, he kind of goes his own route. I guess he's looking for somebody to be on his side, you know, on his page, so he's got his like ally with him there, so that's probably why he heads there first. So he finds him out there with 12 oxen, and he's using the 12 oxen to plough the field. And Elijah throws his mantle onto Elisha, and that he knows straight away that he is to become his successor. That is just a sign that they know. So Elisha, before he goes, because he wants to follow God's word, he takes one of the oxen, he slaughters it, and he gives it to his people. And then he goes on his way with Elijah. And that, my friends, closes the first chapter, chapter 19. So now we move into chapter 20. And as we go into chapter 20, we start the battle between Israel and Syria. So the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, he gathered 32 kings around him with their chariots and their horses, and he wants to besiege Samaria, which is where King Ahab is. He then sends messengers to King Ahab to tell him that his gold, his silver, his wives, and his children all belong to him. And King Ahab, seeing this huge army of people, thinking, look, I can't overcome all of these. Look, yeah, you can have them. So he agrees to that. He says, yeah, take them. Then King Ahab makes a second request. He says, okay, well, my men are going to come and we're going to take whatever we want. Now at this point, King Ahab thinks, right, this is getting a bit ridiculous now. I'm going to speak to the elders. So he speaks to his elders on what to do. He asks for their advice. And the elders tell him to refuse this second request, which he does. So I think the king of Syria really wanted a battle. That's what he was after, and that is what he's about to get. So a prophet approaches King Ahab. Now we don't get a name, we don't know who this prophet is, it just says a prophet approaches him, and he tells him, "Thus says the Lord, he's going to deliver this great army into the hands of the Israelites." So this army of Syria, God is going to deliver to the Israelites. And Ahab, looking at his small army, thinks, by whom? And God, speaking through this prophet, says, through the young leaders of the provinces. And King Ahab says, and who's going to lead this battle? And the prophet says, you're going to lead it. So this meant they ended up with a total of 232 leaders along with 7,000 Israelites to go into battle. So they set out at 12 noon. And the kings in Syria, with his 32 kings around him, King Ben-Hadad is drunk. They've had a lot to drink and they're drunk. So perfect opportunity really for the army of the Israelites to attack. So the Israelites attack, the Syrians flee and they go after them, but King Ben-Hadad escapes on horseback. So the Israelites have had a victory here. And now this prophet returns to Ahab to give him another message from God. And he tells him to strengthen his army because the Syrians are going to attack again in the spring. So the Syrians believed that the God of Israel was only strong, his power was only there in the hills. And they say to their king, King Ben-Hadad, look, if we fight them in the plains, we'll be stronger. So spring comes and King Ben-Hadad gets his army together to go back into battle again with the Israelites. So Israel get ready to go into battle with them, and that prophet again comes to King Ahab and he tells him that the Syrians think that our God is weaker because we're on the plains right now. They think our God is only strong in the hills, but God is going to show his power in the plains so that all will know who is the Lord God. So both armies camp on either side for 7 days, and then on the 7th day the battle starts. And Israel kill 100,000 foot soldiers in just 1 day. The rest flee to the city, and a wall falls down, killing 72,000 men that were left. And the king of Syria flees to the chamber in the city. So next King Ben-Hadad, he calls some of his servants to go and speak to King Ahab. And he wants him to tell him, plead mercy. Tell him that we'll put back all of the cities, that we took from Israel, and that we'll give them markets in different places. If he'll please just save my life. So King Ahab agrees to this, writes a treaty, and he sends him on his way. Now this last part of chapter 20 we see another prophet. This is a different prophet now coming. So we're seeing a lot of prophets. So God's utilizing a lot of people who are connected to him to speak to King Ahab. But he asks a man to strike him down. And this man who comes won't do it. So he says, right, because you've not followed the Lord, a lion will kill you as soon as you part from here. And that is what happens to this guy who refused to strike this prophet. So he's killed by a lion, and then he asks the second man that he sees to strike him, which he does. So he ends up with a wound, and then he covers his eyes, with a bandage, so he's disguised from the king. Now, as King Ahab is passing, he starts this story. He yells out to him and he says, "A man went out to battle, and he was supposed to guard this enemy. He was told if he did not, it would be his life for his life. And unfortunately, this man was busy doing other things, and the man, the enemy, got away." And King Ahab basically says that, well, he's lost his own life then. That's his own doing. Then the prophet removes this bandage from his eyes. So then the king realizes, oh, it's a prophet. And then he tells him, "So shall it be. You've let a man slip away, the man that was meant to be destroyed. For this, your life shall go for his, and your people will go for his." Now this upsets King Ahab, you can imagine, and he returns back to Samaria. This then closes our chapter 20. So this closes our 2 chapters for today. We've seen the prophet Elijah feeling sort of disheartened that he's on his own, and he's gone out, met with the Lord, who's told him, look, you're not on your own, there's people out there, go back out there, we're going to gather some people together and things are going to, pick up. Then we go to King Ahab, who has basically, been doing all of this false god worshipping, and yet God is coming to him and he is helping the Israelites to free themselves from Syria. But then as we get to the end of this chapter, we see that King Ahab has then just let this man go away. This enemy has got away. So now he's going to pay for that. So we will find out what is to become of King Ahab. And I'll be covering that in the next video. So look forward to seeing you soon. Take care now. Bye.